Ned Thompson had never aspired to greatness. His life goals were modest: keep the floors of Sector 7 at NASA's Johnson Space Center spotless, collect his pension in 20 years, and maybe, just maybe, convince Janice from accounting to go on a date with him. But fate, as it turned out, had a twisted sense of humor. "You want me to what?" Ned stared at the assembled group of officials in suits so expensive they made his mop look like a fashion accessory. "To represent humanity, Mr. Thompson," repeated Director Williams, a man whose permanent scowl suggested he'd been weaned on lemons. The message was quite specific. "But I'm just a janitor," Ned protested, wondering if this was some elaborate prank for that stupid reality show his nephew was always watching. "Actually, the alien transmission referred to you as an environmental maintenance technician," corrected a woman with a badge identifying her as Dr. Natalie Rivera, Xenolinguistics. "They seem to have intercepted our personnel database and specifically requested you." Ned glanced down at his blue jumpsuit with Ned stitched over the pocket. "There must be some mistake." "That's what we thought," Williams said with a sigh that could have powered a small wind farm. "We sent them profiles of our top scientists, diplomats, and military leaders. They responded with, and I quote, 'Send the floor cleaner or we will consider Earth hostile and proceed accordingly.'" "But why me?" Ned's voice cracked slightly, which hadn't happened since puberty. Dr. Rivera adjusted her glasses. "The Galactic Council operates on unusual principles. They believe that a civilization is best represented by its most ordinary members." "Gee, thanks," Ned muttered. "You leave tomorrow," Williams stated, not asked. "Dr. Rivera will brief you on protocol. Try not to doom our planet, Thompson." And that was how Ned found himself strapped into a seat aboard what looked like a chrome-plated sea urchin, hurtling through space at speeds that made his stomach relocate somewhere near his kneecaps. His alien escort, a being that resembled a cross between a flamingo and a desk lamp, twisted its elongated neck toward him. "First time off planet." Its voice sounded like helium through a kazoo. "What gave it away?" Ned asked, knuckles white against the armrests. "The screaming when we took off, or the praying to every deity I could remember. Both quite normal," chirped the alien, which had introduced itself as Guzik. "Most new species react similarly, though none quite as dramatically as the Florvarians. Their representatives typically dissolve into goo from anxiety. Makes for messy diplomatic relations." "Great. Good to know I'm doing better than sentient goo," Ned replied, trying not to look out the viewport where stars streaked by like car headlights in a long-exposure photograph. Guzik's headlamp brightened. "You should be honored. Earth is the first planet invited to join the Council in over 300 cycles. Although," it added with what Ned interpreted as hesitation, "I should warn you about the Draconians." "Draconians," Ned repeated. "Let me guess, they're dragon-like." "Lizard-like would be more accurate," Guzik corrected. "And they're not fond of mammals. Especially new, unproven species. They hold 12 seats on the Council and consider themselves the supreme intellects of the galaxy. So basically they're space lizards with a superiority complex," Ned summarized. "Fantastic. They've prepared a special welcome for Earth's representative," Guzik added, mechanical eyelids clicking. "I wouldn't expect much in the way of hospitality." "What's the worst they can do?" Ned asked. "Make me clean their space toilets. Because I've got plenty of experience with difficult bathroom situations. There was this one time after Taco Tuesday in the astronaut wing. We're approaching the galactic hub," Guzik interrupted, perhaps mercifully. The ship decelerated, and Ned's first glimpse of the hub made his jaw drop. It resembled a massive snowflake made of metal and light, spinning slowly against the backdrop of a nebula that painted the darkness in swirls of purple and blue. "Holy," Ned began. "Quite the sight, isn't it?" Guzik agreed. "Home to representatives from 817 species. 818 now, including humans. This was supposed to be my day off," Ned mumbled, as the reality of his situation fully sank in. "I was going to binge-watch that show about the bakers who cry a lot." The ship docked with a gentle shudder, and Guzik extended a spindly limb. "Welcome to galactic politics, Ned Thompson of Earth. Try not to throw up on anyone important." Ned sighed deeply as he unbuckled his harness. "No promises." Stepping off the ship, Ned was immediately assaulted by a cacophony of sounds, smells, and sights that made Times Square on New Year's Eve seem like a meditation retreat. Aliens of every conceivable shape bustled through the massive docking bay, some floating, others slithering, a few appearing to teleport in short bursts. "Stay close," Guzik advised, its voice barely audible above the din. "The hub can be overwhelming for first-timers." That being over there with 17 eyes once lost its representative from Proxima Centauri. Found him 3 cycles later running a food stall in the lower levels, convinced he was a sentient fungus. "That's concerning," Ned replied, instinctively checking that his NASA-issued ID badge was still pinned to his jumpsuit. It felt ridiculously inadequate, like bringing a library card to a retinal scan. They navigated through what appeared to be a combination of spaceport, shopping mall, and United Nations on steroids. Holographic signs flickered in thousands of different languages, occasionally shifting to English when Ned looked directly at them, a courtesy that somehow made him feel more out of place, not less. "The council chamber is in the central spire," Tzik explained, pointing one limb toward a towering structure that seemed to be made of liquid crystal. "But first you must be processed and registered." "Processed sounds ominous," Ned muttered. "Please tell me it doesn't involve probes." Tzik's lamphead flickered in what might have been laughter. "Nothing so primitive, just some basic biometric scanning and cognitive assessment." "Cognitive assessment," Ned echoed. "Like a test." Nobody said anything about tests. "Just a formality," Tzik assured him. "To establish your species' baseline intelligence." "Great," Ned sighed. "Earth's future rests on a janitor's IQ test. We're doomed." Before he could protest further, they arrived at a sterile-looking chamber labeled New Species Integration in at least 50 different scripts. Inside, a being that resembled a blue octopus wearing a bow tie manipulated various floating screens with its tentacles. "Ah, the human," it burbled cheerfully. "I am processing Officer Globbar. How fascinating, your species has so many unnecessary external features, all those little hairs and that peculiar calcium frame. So inefficient." "Thanks, I think," Ned replied, resisting the urge to smooth down his hair self-consciously. "Please stand on the illuminated circle," Globbar instructed, gesturing to a glowing platform in the center of the room. Ned complied, flinching as a beam of light scanned him from head to toe. Various displays around the room filled with data, his height, weight, body composition, and concerning details like digestive inefficiency, 42%, and cranial capacity, minimal but adequate. Interesting," Globbar muttered, tentacles tapping rapidly on the floating screens. "You appear to be mostly water. How do you maintain cohesion?" "Skin," Ned suggested. "Remarkable." Now for the cognitive assessment. A helmet descended from the ceiling, hovering ominously above Ned's head. "This won't hurt," Globbar assured him. "Much." Before Ned could object, the helmet dropped onto his head. Images flashed before his eyes, shapes, patterns, equations, and concepts that made his brain feel like it was doing gymnastics. When the helmet retracted 5 minutes later, Ned was sweating and slightly dizzy. "Did I pass?" he asked weakly. Globbar looked at the results with an expression Ned couldn't begin to interpret on its alien face. "You scored surprisingly adequate. For a water-based lifeform." "Told you," Tzik whispered, lamp brightening smugly. "You are now officially registered," Globbar announced, pressing a tentacle to Ned's ID badge. It shimmered briefly, transforming into something that looked like a platinum credit card with alien script. "This will grant you access to all public areas of the hub, and translate most common languages." "Most?" Ned questioned. "The Vraxians communicate exclusively through spore emissions," Globbar explained. "Translation technology has limits. Note to self, avoid the spore people," Ned mumbled. Their next stop was what Tzik called the Diplomatic Attire Adjustment Center, but was essentially an alien tailor. A spindly being with 4 arms and fabric swatches for eyes measured Ned, with alarming precision. "No, no, this won't do at all," it tutted, circling Ned like a fashion-conscious vulture. "Exposed epidermis, visible hair follicles. The Draconians will consider it a deliberate provocation." Before Ned could protest, he was whisked through a whirlwind of fitting and measuring. 20 minutes later, he emerged wearing what resembled a cobalt blue spacesuit made of material that felt like silk but moved like liquid mercury. "It's temperature regulating, microbe filtering, and moderately blast resistant," the tailor explained proudly. "The collar automatically adjusts to atmospheric conditions." "Does it come with dignity protection?" Ned asked. "Because I feel like I'm wearing fancy pajamas." The tailor ignored him, adjusting a final fold. "There. Now you look almost civilized." As they approached the central spire, Ned noticed the architectural style shifting to something more austere and imposing. The corridors widened, the ceilings soared, and the other beings they passed wore increasingly elaborate attire. "We're entering Draconian-controlled territory," Tzazik whispered. "Remember minimal eye contact, no sudden movements, and under no circumstances should you mention mammals being warm-blooded. They consider it vulgar." "Any other tips?" Ned asked nervously. "Try not to sweat visibly. They find it disgusting." "Great advice for someone who stress sweats," Ned muttered, already feeling perspiration forming at his temples. They rounded a corner and came face to face with what could only be Draconians, tall bipedal reptilians with iridescent scales, elaborate frills, and expressions of such perfect disdain that they would have made fashion magazine editors weep with envy. "So," hissed the tallest one, its vertical pupils narrowing to slits as it looked down at Ned. "This is Earth's chosen representative. How quaint, Ambassador Thraxis," Siggs greeted with a respectful bow. "May I present Ned Thompson of Earth?" Each hello, Ned managed, attempting to bow but mostly succeeding in an awkward nod. "It speaks," another Draconian remarked, this one wearing an elaborate headdress of metallic plates. "How novel." Thraxis circled Ned slowly, tongue flicking out occasionally to taste the air. "I am Ambassador Thraxis of the Seventh Clutch, High Counselor of the Draconian Empire, and Senior Adjudicator of New Species Integration. I'm Ned," Ned replied lamely. "I clean floors." This earned him a chorus of hissing laughs from the assembled Draconians. "Perfect," Thraxis exclaimed with cruel amusement. "The humans send a sanitation worker to negotiate their species' fate. How delightfully symbolic." "I didn't exactly volunteer," Ned pointed out, his nervousness giving way to annoyance. "The council session begins shortly," Thraxis continued, ignoring Ned's comment. "We've prepared a special accommodation for Earth's representative." The way he said special made Ned's stomach sink. He glanced at Xick, who managed to look worried despite having a lamp for a head. "Your species is the smallest ever invited to join the council," Thraxis explained with obvious relish. "Both in stature and significance. We've arranged seating accordingly." The massive doors to the council chamber swung open, revealing a circular room with a table that could have seated the population of a small country. Around it sat representatives of dozens of species, some so alien that Ned's brain struggled to process their forms. And there at the massive table was Earth's designated spot, a tiny booster seat perched on an enormous chair, with a stepladder leading up to it. The Draconians watched expectantly, waiting for Ned's humiliation. "Your seat awaits, human," Thraxis announced, gesturing dramatically. "One small seat for a human." The chamber fell silent, as all eyes, stalks, sensory clusters, and other unidentifiable perception organs turned toward Ned. Ned stared at the miniature seat, painfully aware of the hundreds of alien eyes watching his reaction. This was clearly meant to be his moment of humiliation, the punchline to a cosmic joke with humanity as the butt. For a brief second, he considered the diplomatic approach. Dr. Rivera had coached him on proper protocol: remain dignified, avoid confrontation, represent Earth with poise. Then again, Dr. Rivera wasn't the one facing a glorified high chair. "Interesting design choice," Ned remarked, walking toward the ridiculous seat. He ran his hand over the tiny armrest. "Very minimalist. I'm guessing whoever designed this also does airplane economy seating." A ripple of something, surprise, confusion, passed through the chamber. Thraxis frowned, his scales shifting from emerald to a darker green. "You find your accommodations acceptable?" "Oh, I wouldn't go that far," Ned replied, surprising himself with his sudden confidence. "But I've cleaned bathrooms after the annual NASA chili cook-off. This barely registers on my humiliation scale." He climbed the stepladder with deliberate casualness and settled into the tiny seat, which was predictably uncomfortable but thankfully supported his weight. "Now that everyone's seated," Ned continued, looking around the massive table, "I believe we have business to discuss. Unless this is just social hour, in which case I should mention I make a mean margarita." A being that resembled a sentient crystal formation chimed melodically. "The human displays unexpected aplomb. Fascinating." "Indeed," agreed a massive entity composed entirely of what appeared to be floating gas bubbles. "Most new species representatives require sedation after their first council exposure." Thraxis's tail lashed in obvious irritation. "Let us proceed with formalities," he hissed. The Galactic Council acknowledges the presence of Earth's representative. As is tradition with potentially qualifying species, humanity must demonstrate its worthiness to join our ranks. Worthiness, Ned repeated. I thought we were already invited. Provisionally, clarified a new voice. Ned turned to see a small blue-skinned alien approaching his ridiculous perch. Unlike the others, this being had an almost human appearance, save for its cobalt coloration and eyes that seemed to contain miniature galaxies. Ambassador Lyra of the Pleiadian Compact, the blue alien introduced herself with a slight bow. And yes, Earth has been provisionally accepted, but as with all new species, you must pass the trials of integration. Nobody mentioned trials, Ned said, shooting an accusatory glance at Kazik, who was hovering near the chamber entrance. My apologies, Kazik's lamp flickered apologetically. I was instructed to withhold certain information until the formal announcement. The trials are simple, Thraxus explained, his voice dripping with condescension. 3 challenges to demonstrate your species' capabilities. Success means Earth joins the Council as a probationary member. Failure means, he paused dramatically, classification as a protected planet. That sounds better than it is, Lyra whispered to Ned. Protected planets are essentially galactic wildlife preserves. No technology sharing, no interstellar travel, no vote in council matters. So we'd be the galaxy's equivalent of a petting zoo, Ned summarized. Fantastic. The trials will commence immediately, Thraxus announced. As is tradition, the senior species representatives will determine the nature of each challenge. The Draconian's smug expression told Ned everything he needed to know. These tests would be rigged against him. Wait, Ned protested. Shouldn't I get some time to prepare? Or at least a bathroom break? Mammals. Thraxus sighed dramatically. Always at the mercy of their biological functions. Lyra stepped forward. A short recess is customary before the trials. Even the Vrexislar were granted preparation time, and they experienced time at 1/10 our rate. After a moment of obvious annoyance, Thraxus nodded. Very well. You have 1 standard unit to prepare. He turned to leave, his entourage of Draconians falling in behind him. How long is a standard unit? Ned whispered to Lyra once they were out of earshot. About 20 Earth minutes, she replied. Come, we should talk privately. She led him to a small antechamber off the main council room, its walls shimmering with a subtle energy field. Privacy barrier, Lyra explained, noticing Ned's curious glance. Even Draconian listening devices can't penetrate it. Why are you helping me? Ned asked. Not that I'm complaining, but everyone else seems perfectly happy to watch me fail spectacularly. Lyra's galaxy eyes twinkled. Let's just say not everyone appreciates Draconian dominance in the council. My people were once in your position, underestimated, mocked, set up to fail, but you obviously succeeded. We did, she confirmed with a smile, much to the Draconians' ongoing dismay. So what exactly are these trials? Ned asked. Intelligence tests, feats of strength, dance-off. The trials vary for each species, Lyra explained. They're meant to test the fundamental qualities the Council values: intelligence, adaptability, and ethical reasoning. But the Draconians will ensure your trials are particularly challenging. Because they don't like mammals. Because they're afraid of you. Ned nearly choked. Afraid? Of humans? Have they seen our reality TV? Draconian society is built on order, hierarchy, and predictability, Lyra said. Humans are anything but predictable. Your species developed spaceflight barely a century after discovering powered flight. You went from primitive computers to global information networks in mere decades. The Draconians took millennia to make similar advances, so they're jealous of our speed-running technology. They fear your potential, Lyra corrected. If humans join the Council, the balance of power shifts. The Draconians have dominated for 12,000 cycles. They're not eager to share that power, especially with mammals they consider beneath them. No pressure then, Ned muttered, slumping against the wall. The fate of human advancement rests on a janitor passing alien sats. Janitor. Lyra tilted her head curiously. I clean things for a living, Ned explained. Floors, bathrooms, windows. I'm the guy they call when someone makes a mess. To his surprise, Lyra grinned. Perfect. How is that perfect? The Draconians chose you because they thought a manual laborer would be easy to humiliate, she explained. But they fundamentally misunderstand human society. Their civilization has rigid castes. Thinkers never touch cleaning implements. Cleaners never participate in governance. So they think I'm literally too stupid to pass their tests. Precisely. And that gives you an advantage. Lyra's eyes sparkled. They'll underestimate you at every turn. I hate to break it to you, Ned said, but I'm not exactly Einstein. I barely passed high school physics. You don't need to be a genius, Lyra assured him. You just need to be human. What does that even mean? It means Lyra began, but was interrupted by the door sliding open. Kazik's lamphead poked through. Time's up. The council is reconvening. As they walked back to the chamber, Lyra whispered, whatever happens, remember that humans have one quality no other species has mastered. Our charming personality, Ned guessed. Creative problem solving, she corrected. You see solutions where others see only obstacles. Back in the council chamber, Ned climbed once more onto his ridiculous booster seat. The room had transformed during his absence, with a large circular platform now occupying the center. Thraxus stood beside it, looking even more smugly reptilian than before, if such a thing were possible. The trials will be administered in sequence, he announced. Each challenge must be completed before proceeding to the next. Failure at any stage results in immediate classification as a protected planet. The crystal being chimed again. As is tradition, the challenges must be reasonable and achievable based on the species' demonstrated capabilities. Of course, Thraxus agreed, his tone suggesting anything but sincerity. We've designed the trials based on thorough research of human capabilities. Somehow, Ned doubted the Draconians had been watching Humans Being Awesome compilation videos. The first trial, Thraxus announced, will test physical capability and environmental adaptation. The central platform hummed to life, projecting a holographic environment that quickly solidified into what appeared to be a physical obstacle course. It featured terrain from what looked like a dozen different planets, ice fields, lava flows, dense vegetation, and even what appeared to be an anti-gravity zone. The representative must navigate from start to finish, Thraxus explained, crossing each environmental zone within the allotted time. And how long do most species take to complete this? Ned asked, eyeing a particularly nasty-looking acid pool. The current record is held by the arachnoids of Tau Ceti, replied a Draconian official. 47 units. And my time limit is. Thraxus's smile revealed far too many teeth. 10 units. Murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Even Kazik's lamp dimmed in apparent shock. That's less than a quarter of the record time, Lyra protested. It violates the principle of achievability. Humans claim to be remarkably adaptable, Thraxus countered. Their own broadcasts boast of their physical prowess. This should be, what's the human phrase, a piece of cake? Ned stared at the impossible course, then at the expectant faces of the council members. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, but the Draconians watched with undisguised anticipation of his failure. When do I start? He asked, standing up from his tiny seat. Now, Thraxus declared, pressing a glowing symbol on his wrist device. A holographic countdown appeared above the course. 10 o'clock in universal numerals and immediately began ticking down. 9:59, 9:58. Ned took a deep breath and stepped toward the starting line. NASA really should have sent an astronaut, he muttered. Ned approached the starting line of the obstacle course, acutely aware that hundreds of alien eyes were watching him. The first section looked relatively straightforward. A climbing wall followed by a narrow bridge over what appeared to be boiling mud. I can do this, he muttered to himself. It's just like that team-building exercise at the NASA summer picnic. Except, with actual life or death consequences for all of humanity. The timer continued its merciless countdown. 9:45, 9:44. Any rules I should know about? Ned called to Thraxus. Things that would get me disqualified. The Draconian's smug smile faltered slightly. You must reach the endpoint within the time limit. Beyond that, there are no specific restrictions. That was interesting. Ned glanced around the course again, noting how each section seemed designed to exploit human physiological weaknesses. The gravity in one section would make his limbs feel like lead. Another appeared to be filled with toxic gas. Right, Ned said, stretching his arms in an exaggerated warm-up. Here goes nothing. He sprinted toward the climbing wall, surprising even himself with his burst of speed. Adrenaline, it turned out, was a hell of a motivator. The wall was higher than it had appeared, at least 30 feet of smooth, nearly featureless surface with only tiny handholds. 8:53, 8:52. Ned jumped, grabbing the first handhold, and began to climb. Years of cleaning windows on extension ladders had given him a decent head for heights. The materials of his new suit seemed to enhance his grip, allowing him to make steady progress upward. Halfway up, disaster struck. A handhold crumbled under his fingers, clearly designed to fail. Ned slipped, scrambling desperately for purchase as he began to slide downward. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Thraxus leaned forward eagerly. In a move born purely of panic, Ned threw himself sideways, crashing into a section of wall that seemed slightly different in texture. His fingers found a seam, a maintenance access panel that wasn't meant to be part of the challenge. With a grunt he pried it open and hauled himself inside. "What is he doing?" Thraxus demanded. "That's not part of the course. You said no specific restrictions," Lyra reminded him sweetly. Inside the maintenance tunnel, Ned found himself in a narrow passageway that ran parallel to the obstacle course. Emergency lighting illuminated what was clearly a service corridor for technicians to maintain the simulation. "Work smarter, not harder." Ned grinned, recalling the motto emblazoned on the break room wall back at NASA. He ran along the tunnel, occasionally peering through observation ports to check his position relative to the course. When he reached the end of the climbing section, he popped out another maintenance hatch, emerging directly at the start of the narrow bridge. 721, 721, 720. "The human is cheating," Thraxus protested, tail lashing furiously. The crystal being chimed disagreeably. "The parameters you established permitted any method of traversal from start to finish. Creative problem solving," Lyra whispered loudly enough for Ned to hear. The bridge section proved more challenging. It swayed precariously with each step, and the heat rising from the boiling mud below was intense enough to make Ned's eyes water. Midway across, the bridge began to disintegrate. Not an accident, but a deliberate part of the challenge. Ned broke into a run, hoping momentum would carry him across. The final section collapsed just as he leaped, leaving him airborne for a heart-stopping moment before he crashed onto the platform on the other side, rolling to absorb the impact. 640 far. The next section featured rapidly shifting gravity. Ned took one step and immediately felt his weight increase tenfold, dropping him to his knees. The pressure was immense, making even breathing difficult. This was the section where Thraxus expected him to fail. Human muscles simply weren't designed to function under such extreme gravitational forces. Ned glanced around desperately and noticed something small maintenance robots positioned at the edges of the gravity field, their lights blinking as they monitored the equipment. "If I can't go through," Ned gasped, an idea forming. He army crawled to the edge of the gravity field, each movement requiring monumental effort. The maintenance robots skittered away as he approached, except for one that seemed to be anchored to the floor. "Sorry about this," Ned told the robot as he reached it, grabbing onto its housing and pressing what he hoped was its emergency shutdown button. The robot emitted a shrill beep and went dark. More importantly, it retracted its anchor, revealing a small maintenance tunnel below, bypassing the gravity field entirely. 512, 511. "This is outrageous." Thraxus was practically foaming at his reptilian mouth. "He's subverting the entire purpose of the trial." "On the contrary," countered the gaseous entity, "he is demonstrating remarkable adaptability, precisely what this trial is meant to test." Ned squeezed through the maintenance tunnel, emerging on the far side of the gravity field. The timer showed he was making better time than anyone had expected, including himself. The remaining sections proved equally challenging but increasingly familiar. The toxic gas zone had emergency breathing apparatus stored nearby for maintenance workers. The electrified maze had a control panel that Ned, with his NASA maintenance credentials, quickly figured out how to temporarily disable. By the time he reached the final obstacle, a seemingly impassable wall of energy, Ned had found his rhythm. He wasn't trying to overcome the obstacles through brute force or conventional means. He was looking for the workarounds, the maintenance shortcuts, the systems designed for the people who kept this whole elaborate show running. 233. 232. "He cannot possibly pass through the quantum barrier," Thraxus insisted, scales now an agitated reddish-green. It would tear apart his primitive molecular structure. Ned studied the energy wool, noting how it pulsed with a regular rhythm. Rather than searching for another maintenance tunnel, he watched carefully, timing the pulses. Then, to the astonishment of the entire council, he simply walked through the barrier during a microsecond fluctuation in its cycle, a maintenance feature designed to allow technicians to pass through safely during scheduled downtime. The timer froze as Ned stepped onto the finish platform, 147 remaining. Silence fell over the council chamber, broken only by the sound of Thraxis's tail angrily slapping against the floor. "I believe that concludes the first trial," Lyra announced, unable to keep the delight from her voice. Ned, breathing heavily but grinning, bowed theatrically toward the council. "Any other death traps you'd like me to clean up while I'm here? The air filtration system looks like it could use a good dusting." Thraxis was practically vibrating with rage. "The second trial," he hissed, "will test intelligence and problem-solving. No maintenance tunnels will save you there, human." The obstacle course dissolved, replaced by what appeared to be an elaborate holographic puzzle station. Symbols and geometric shapes floated in three-dimensional space, constantly shifting and rearranging themselves. "You will solve the algorithmic sequence," Thraxis declared, "a mathematical challenge that has stumped the finest minds in the galaxy. The current record is 3 days of continuous calculation, and my time limit." Ned asked, already knowing the answer would be ridiculous. "1 unit," Thraxis replied with malicious satisfaction. 20 Earth minutes." Murmurs of protest rose from several council members, but Thraxis silenced them with a sharp gesture. "Unless the human wishes to concede defeat," he suggested hopefully. Ned approached the holographic display, studying the swirling symbols. They made absolutely no sense to him. Alien mathematics far beyond anything taught in high school. "I don't suppose there's a user manual?" he asked. "Begin," Thraxis commanded, ignoring the question. The countdown appeared again. 20 o'clock, 1959. Ned stared at the incomprehensible symbols, feeling the weight of Earth's future on his shoulders. He glanced at Lyra, who gave him an encouraging nod. Creative problem-solving. That's what she had said humans excelled at. As Ned contemplated the impossible puzzle before him, a maintenance worker scurried across the chamber floor, adjusting something beneath the holographic projector. No one else seemed to notice the worker, the invisible people who kept everything running, just like back on Earth. Suddenly Ned knew exactly what to do. 1922, 1921. Ned approached the swirling mathematical puzzle with the confidence of someone who had absolutely no idea what he was looking at. The symbols pulsed and rearranged themselves in patterns that seemed to follow some alien logic beyond his comprehension. "The algorithmic sequence requires the calculation of probability fields across 11 dimensions," Thraxis explained, clearly enjoying Ned's confusion. "The solutions must account for quantum uncertainty principles that even our most advanced civilizations spent millennia perfecting." "Uh-huh." Ned nodded, as if that explained everything. "And this particular puzzle, has anyone solved it before?" Thraxis's smirk widened. The hive mind of Rigel 7 came closest. They devoted 50 of their finest neural clusters to the problem for 3 standard cycles. And did they solve it? They came within 0.0003% of the solution before their neural clusters collapsed from exhaustion, Thraxis said with poorly disguised glee. 1844, 1843. Ned studied the control interface, mind racing. He didn't need to actually solve the puzzle, he just needed to make the system think he had solved it. Years of working around temperamental NASA equipment had taught him that every system had backdoors, overrides, and maintenance protocols. His gaze fell on a small access panel beneath the holographic projector. The maintenance worker he'd noticed earlier had been adjusting something there. "I'm going to need to examine the parameters more closely," Ned announced, dropping to his knees and crawling under the projection table. "What is he doing now?" demanded a Draconian official. "This is highly irregular. There are no rules against examining the equipment," Lyra pointed out. "Unless you're suggesting the trial isn't fair to begin with." While the council argued, Ned quickly located the access panel. It required a security code, but the panel design was remarkably similar to the ones used at NASA for sensitive equipment, and like those panels, this one probably had an emergency override for maintenance purposes. 1759, 1758. Ned pressed his palm against the scanner, hoping his new diplomatic credentials might grant him access. To his surprise, the panel beeped affirmatively and slid open, revealing a complex array of crystalline components and pulsing light filaments. "I see," Ned muttered to himself, studying the components. "It's just like the simulator control panels back home, except alien." Among the components was a small rectangular device with a universal data port, the alien equivalent of a USB drive. It was labeled in alien script, but its position in the system architecture suggested it contained the puzzle parameters and solution criteria. 1642, 1641, is the human attempting to sabotage the equipment? Thraxis demanded, his voice rising in pitch. "I'm conducting a thorough analysis," Ned called from under the table. "Very complex algorithms here. Lots of quantum things." Working quickly, Ned disconnected the data module and examined it. If his hunch was correct, this contained both the puzzle parameters and the expected solution. NASA's security systems work similarly. The verification module needed to contain the correct response to authenticate against. He plugged the module back in, but deliberately left one connection slightly loose, a classic trick for creating a controlled glitch in a system. 1520, 1519. Emerging from under the table, Ned approached the holographic display with newfound confidence. He began manipulating the symbols randomly, making it appear as though he was working through some complex calculation. "The human appears to be employing an unorthodox methodology," observed the gaseous entity. "He's stalling," Thraxis snapped. "There's no possible way a primitive mammal could comprehend multidimensional quantum algorithms." Ned continued his theatrical performance, occasionally glancing at the timer. When it reached exactly 10 o'clock, he delivered a sharp kick to the underside of the projection table, right where the loose connection was located. The system flickered, symbols freezing mid-rotation. Then, unexpectedly, the entire display turned green, and a series of confirmation tones sounded. "What?" Thraxis gasped, his frill expanding in shock. "Impossible." The display showed a completion notification, with the timing 10 o'clock exactly. "I believe that's what you call optimal efficiency," Ned remarked, trying to look nonchalant despite his racing heart. The council erupted in a cacophony of sounds, chimes, hisses, burbles, and electronic tones, that translated roughly as utter astonishment. "The system confirms a valid solution," announced the crystal being, after consulting a data terminal. "Though by a most unconventional approach." "He cheated," Thraxis roared, tail lashing violently. "Check the system. This is sabotage." "Actually," Lyra interjected smoothly, "the human employed a known property of the quantum verification systems. A momentary power fluctuation forces the system to run a rapid self-diagnostic, comparing current parameters against optimal solutions. If the input variables are within acceptable margins at precisely that moment, the system defaults to a positive verification." "You knew about this?" Thraxis demanded. "All maintenance workers know about it," Lyra replied with a serene smile. "It's in the technical manual. Section 13, subsection 7, paragraph 4. But he's not a maintenance worker for the council." "No," Ned agreed. "I'm a maintenance worker for NASA. Turns out, complex systems have similar workarounds across the galaxy." "Who knew?" Thraxis was practically apoplectic, his scales cycling through a range of colors that Ned suspected represented the reptilian equivalent of a temper tantrum. "The human has completed 2 trials, announced a new voice. The eldest, a being so ancient and respected that even Thraxis fell silent at its words. "By our laws, he must be permitted to attempt the 3rd and final trial." "Thank you, eldest," Ned said, bowing respectfully. "I'm ready whenever Ambassador Thraxis regains his composure." This sent another ripple of amusement through the council. The Draconians were losing face with every passing moment, and Thraxis knew it. "The 3rd trial," he hissed, composing himself with visible effort, "will test your species' ethical reasoning and judgment. No maintenance tunnels or system glitches will help you here." Human, the holographic projector reconfigured once more, this time creating what appeared to be a 3-dimensional model of a solar system. Ned recognized Earth immediately, blue and green, third from the sun. "This simulation represents your home system," Thraxis explained, his voice dangerously soft. "We have placed a theoretical threat within it, an extinction-level event that will eliminate all life on Earth within 1 standard cycle." The simulation zoomed in, showing a massive asteroid on a collision course with Earth. Your task is simple, Thraxus continued. You must determine the optimal response to save your species. A control panel materialized before Ned, offering multiple options: destroy asteroid, evacuate Earth population, deflect asteroid path, and several others. Choose wisely, Thraxus advised with false concern. Each option has consequences that will reveal your species' true nature. Ned studied the panel, suspicion growing. This seemed too straightforward. There had to be a catch. What's the time limit on this one? He asked. No time limit, Thraxus replied. Ethical decisions should not be rushed. Take all the time you need to reveal humanity's approach to crisis. Ned selected deflect asteroid path, the most obvious solution. Immediately, the simulation changed, showing the asteroid veering away from Earth and directly toward Mars. Interesting, Thraxus commented. You've saved Earth, but doomed the hypothetical Mars colony established in this simulation. Millions of human lives sacrificed for billions. A coldly logical choice. Wait, there was a Mars colony, Ned asked. That wasn't in the initial parameters. Hidden variables, Thraxus explained with obvious satisfaction. Just as real crises never present all information clearly. Ned reset the simulation and tried destroy asteroid. The visualization showed the asteroid being shattered by nuclear weapons, but then demonstrated how the resulting debris would create an even worse outcome: multiple impacts across Earth and neighboring planets. Each option he selected revealed new hidden variables, each worse than the last. It was a no-win scenario, deliberately designed to force an unethical choice. I see the problem, Ned said finally. There's no solution where everyone survives, is there? Life presents difficult choices, Thraxus replied, unable to keep the triumph from his voice. Leaders must sometimes sacrifice some to save others. We merely wish to understand how humans prioritize such decisions. Ned studied the simulation again, mind racing. This wasn't just a test of ethics, it was a trap. No matter what choice he made, Thraxus would use it to argue that humans were either too ruthless or too sentimental for galactic politics. Then he noticed something. Every scenario assumed accepting the parameters as given. But what if? I'd like to examine the system's core programming, Ned announced. That is not part of the trial, Thraxus objected immediately. The human may examine whatever aspects of the trial he wishes, the eldest ruled. As with previous trials, we place no restrictions on methodology. Before Thraxus could protest further, Ned was already accessing the underlying code of the simulation. Years of troubleshooting NASA's systems had taught him to look for the root cause of problems, not just the symptoms. After several minutes of investigation, he looked up with a smile that made Thraxus take an involuntary step backward. I've made my decision, Ned announced. And what impossible choice have you selected? Thraxus asked, confident in his trap. Instead of selecting an option, Ned executed a command sequence that no one expected. He rewrote the parameters of the simulation itself. The display flickered, then stabilized, showing the asteroid now on a trajectory that would miss both Earth and Mars, passing safely through a gravitational keyhole that hadn't been included in the original simulation. What have you done? Thraxus demanded. I rejected the premise of your test, Ned explained calmly. You created a no-win scenario by deliberately removing viable alternatives from the simulation. So I added them back in. That's not how the test works, a Draconian official protested. Isn't it? Ned challenged. You said this was a test of ethical reasoning. Well, I reasoned that the most ethical approach was to challenge the false dichotomy presented to me. In a real crisis, we wouldn't just accept the first set of options presented. We'd look for alternatives, create new solutions, refuse to accept that sacrifice is inevitable, until we'd explored every possibility. The council chamber fell silent as his words sank in. This human, the eldest finally spoke, has demonstrated the quality we value above all others in council members: the refusal to accept artificial limitations when lives are at stake. But he changed the parameters of the test. Thraxus protested, a last desperate attempt to salvage his plan. He recognized that the test itself was unethical. Lyra countered. What better demonstration of sound ethical reasoning could there be? The eldest's many eyes blinked in what might have been approval. The trials are complete. The human has succeeded in all three challenges. Thraxus looked as if he might literally explode. His scales now a mottled purple-red of pure rage. Earth is hereby granted probationary membership in the Galactic Council, the eldest declared. And as is tradition when a new species joins our ranks, their representative shall be given accommodations befitting their status. At these words, Ned's ridiculous booster seat transformed, expanding into a full-sized chair identical to those of the other council members. Furthermore, the eldest continued, as the Draconian Empire sponsored Earth's trials, diplomatic protocol dictates they must also sponsor Earth's formal introduction to interstellar society. This final indignity was too much for Thraxus. With a strangled hiss, he stormed from the chamber, his entourage scrambling to follow. Ned settled into his new properly sized chair, unable to keep a grin from spreading across his face. So, he asked Lyra, who had approached to congratulate him, "Does this mean I get dental with my new galactic health plan?" The Galactic Council formally recognizes Earth as a probationary member, announced the eldest, their multi-layered voice echoing through the chamber. Let the record show that humanity has demonstrated exceptional aptitude in all three trials. Ned sat in his newly materialized proper-sized chair, still trying to process what had just happened. 24 hours ago, he had been mopping floors in Sector 7. Now he was Earth's official representative to an interstellar government. "Congratulations, Representative Thompson," Lyra said, her galaxy eyes twinkling. "You've made quite an impression." "Thanks," Ned replied, running his hand over the smooth, comfortable armrest of his new chair. "Though I'm pretty sure NASA is going to have a collective aneurysm when they find out what happened." The council session continued with various procedural matters, most of which went over Ned's head. He caught occasional phrases like trade route access and technology sharing protocols that suggested humanity had just received keys to the Galactic Kingdom. Later, at what appeared to be some sort of diplomatic reception, Ned found himself surrounded by curious representatives from dozens of species, the crystal being approached chiming melodically. "Your solution to the third trial was most illuminating," it resonated. "In 9,000 cycles, no species has ever rejected the parameters themselves. Where I come from, we call it thinking outside the box," Ned explained. "Though in my case, it's usually more about figuring out how to clean coffee stains off ceiling tiles. The Draconians will not forget this humiliation," warned a tall insectoid being, mandibles clicking softly. "They've dominated council politics for millennia. They'll get over it," Ned shrugged. "Or they won't. Either way, Earth is at the table now." Across the room, Sek was excitedly recounting Ned's exploits to a group of wide-eyed aliens, its lamphead flashing like a disco ball. "And then you wouldn't believe it. He kicked the projection table, kicked it. Your methods were unorthodox," noted the gaseous entity, bubbles pulsing thoughtfully. "The maintenance workers are already sharing stories. You've become something of a folk hero among the station's service staff," Ned grinned. "The invisible people who keep everything running, they're the same everywhere, I guess." As the reception continued, Ned noticed a small delegation of Draconians enter the chamber. Instead of Thraxus, they were led by an older Draconian, whose scales had faded to a distinguished silver. The elder Draconian approached Ned, moving with the careful dignity of advanced age. "Representative Thompson," he greeted with a shallow bow, "I am Elder Sistrax of the Fifth Clutch." Ned returned the bow, slightly deeper out of respect for the elder's age. "Nice to meet you. I have been dispatched to inform you that the Draconian Empire will, as tradition dictates, sponsor Earth's formal introduction to interstellar society," Sistrax stated. "Ambassador Thraxus has been reassigned. To a pleasant posting, I hope?" Ned asked innocently. The elder's mouth twitched in what might have been the Draconian equivalent of a suppressed smile. "He will find the methane swamps of Epsilon Eridani most educational." "I'm sure he will," Ned agreed, struggling to keep a straight face. "I must also convey that the Draconian High Council, while acknowledging your unusual methods, recognizes the inherent adaptability they demonstrate." Sistrax's voice dropped to a near whisper. "Not all Draconians share Thraxus's disdain for mammals. Some of us believe the Council has grown complacent." Before Ned could respond, Sistrax returned to his normal volume. "We look forward to a productive relationship with Earth, Representative Thompson." As the elder Draconian glided away, Lyra appeared at Ned's side. "Well, that was unexpected. Politics is politics, I guess," Ned mused. "Even with scales. Your transport back to Earth has been prepared," Lyra informed him. "Though I hope you'll return soon. The first session with Earth as a probationary member will commence in one standard cycle, about 3 Earth weeks." "About that," Ned said, scratching his head. I'm not actually qualified for this job. I'm pretty sure Earth will want to send someone with actual diplomatic credentials. Lyra's expression grew serious. The Galactic Council doesn't work that way, Ned. You passed the trials, you are Earth's representative, at least until your probationary period ends in one standard revolution. How long is that in Earth time? About 5 years. Ned's jaw dropped. 5 years. But I have plants to water. And my Netflix queue. I'm sure your government will make appropriate arrangements, Lyra assured him. Most new representatives maintain contact with their homeworlds while residing primarily at the hub. As the reality of his situation sank in, Ned gazed out a viewport at the swirling nebula beyond. So I'm going to be Earth's ambassador for 5 years. Me? The guy who cleans up after NASA's Taco Tuesdays. The Council values actual experience over theoretical knowledge, Lyra explained. Your methods demonstrated exactly why your species deserves a voice here. You saw solutions where others saw only obstacles. Ned shook his head, laughing softly. Director Williams is going to have a stroke. There is one more thing, Lyra added, producing a small crystalline device. This contains the standard technology package for new member species. FTL communications, advanced medical protocols, sustainable energy schematics, the basics. The basics, Ned repeated, staring at the device in awe. This could change everything for Earth. That's the idea, Lyra replied with a smile. Though I should warn you, the Draconians will be watching closely to see how humanity handles these gifts. Responsible use is part of your probationary evaluation. Sisek bounded over, lamp glowing brightly. Your Earth leaders are demanding an update. They seem quite agitated. I bet they are, Ned sighed. Tell them, he paused, looking around at the incredible vista of alien life and technology surrounding him. Tell them humanity's got a seat at the table, and we're not giving it up. As Gisik scurried away, Ned settled back in his chair and grinned. You know what the strangest part is? My mother always said my cleaning skills would take me places someday. Lyra tilted her head curiously. And did she imagine those places would include the center of galactic politics? Probably not, Ned admitted. But she did always tell me to look for the doors others didn't see. Around them, the hub continued its eternal dance of diplomacy and commerce, now with humanity officially part of its rhythm. And somewhere in the bowels of the station, maintenance workers shared stories of the Earth janitor who had cleaned the Draconians' clock. Not bad for what was supposed to be his day off.